All right, you goddamn space cadets, strap yourselves in. We're going deep diving into SpaceX today, Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy launches specifically. And holy shit, you guys sent us enough Wikipedia data to choke a goddamn horse.
So you seem pretty fascinated by their launch rate.
You're damn right I am. It's fucking insane. 61 launches in 2023 alone blew those goddamn Russians out of the water. The record had been standing since like 1980. Then SpaceX breaks their own record the very next year. Hell, they even managed to squeeze in 10 launches in a single month. How the hell did...
Reusability is the key here. Flying those same boosters over and over again. Some of them have flown like 17, 18, even 23 times. That's practically unheard of in the space game, you know?
Hold on a sec. A lot of those launches are just chucking Starlink satellites up there, right? What are they trying to do? Give internet to every goddamn penguin in Antarctica.
It's true. Huge chunk of those launches are all Starlink, yeah. Over 200 dedicated Starlink launches by late 2024. The scale of it's mind-boggling, man. They're literally building a global internet network from scratch.
Okay, but it can't be all Starlink, right?
Oh.
I'm seeing stuff here about the International Space Station, that Psyche mission to a metal asteroid, and even some shady government spies satellite bullshit.
You got it. Cargo runs to the ISS. Scientific missions like Psyche, they're going to investigate that metal asteroid, a whole asteroid made of metal. Think about that shit. And yeah, those super secret payloads for the NRO, the National Reconnaissance Office, they're the government's spy agency in space, basically, keeping an eye on everything from up there. Plus, SpaceX is also the right of choice for companies like OneWeb and SES who are building their own internet constellations, too.
So SpaceX is like the fucking Uber of space now.
Yeah.
They're running the whole damn show. All right, what about Falcon Heavy? That thing's a goddamn monster. 3 boosters strapped together. Looks like something out of a Michael Bay movie.
The Falcon Heavy is their heavy lifter, yeah. Built for those super heavy payloads. It launched the Jupiter 3 communications satellite. That's the largest geostationary satellite ever, by the way. And they're even using it to send NASA's Europa Clipper mission to study Jupiter's icy moon, Europa.
Europa, huh? Isn't that the one scientists think might have alien squids swimming around under the ice?
It is. That's one theory, at least. But yeah, Europa Clipper is going to give us a much better understanding of what's going on under there. Here's something you might not know. The core booster on Falcon Heavy is often expended, especially when they need high speed for the mission. Like sending the Europa Clipper screaming through space at almost 46,000 kilometers per hour.
Wait, they just ditch a whole booster sometimes? That seems kind of wasteful when they're all about reusability.
It's a trade-off. For some missions, they need that extra kick to get where they're going, and recovering the core just isn't feasible.
Right, that makes sense. But even with all their fancy reusable rocket tech, they still screw up sometimes, right?
You bet. In 2024, they had an upper stage fail to relight after a Starlink launch. Those satellites ended up burning up on re-entry. It was their first major Falcon 9 failure in a long time.
Damn. What the hell happened? Did Elon get distracted by Twitter again?
Ironically, it was a tiny crack in a fuel line, caused by vibration, of all things. Just shows how even the smallest things can have catastrophic consequences when you're dealing with space.
Yeah, that's a sobering thought. All right, let's try to wrap up this part. We've covered SpaceX's insane launch rate, their Starlink domination, the Falcon Heavy's raw power, and even that rare but spectacular failure. What's your big takeaway so far?
I think it's the sheer volume and diversity of their missions, honestly. SpaceX is launching more frequently with heavier and more varied payloads than ever before. They are single-handedly changing the game when it comes to space access, that's for sure.
Yeah, and they're showing no signs of slowing down. Their launch manifest is absolutely jam-packed. We're talking about over 150 launches in 2025.
That's right. And don't forget those rideshare missions. They're cramming dozens of small satellites onto a single Falcon 9. It's like they're running a space bus service for all the smaller players out there.
Space bus. I like it. That's a great way to put it. In part 2, we'll dive deeper into these missions and their impact on the space industry as a whole. Stick around, folks. We're just getting started.
So we've seen the raw numbers, the sheer volume of launches SpaceX is pulling off. But if we zoom out a bit, what does it all mean for the space industry, really?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Are we looking at, like, a new space race, or is it more like a goddamn space gold rush with SpaceX leading the charge?
Honestly, it's a bit of both. I mean, SpaceX is definitely pushing the boundaries of what's possible, launching more often, carrying heavier payloads, and doing it all at a lower cost than anyone else. This puts a lot of pressure on the other launch providers to either innovate or get left in the dust.
Yeah, those old-school aerospace giants, ULA, Arianespace, the Russians, they must be pissed off seeing SpaceX eat their lunch.
They're definitely feeling the heat. ULA's working on its new Vulcan rocket, but it's been plagued by delays and shit. Arianespace is hoping the Ariane 6 will be their savior, but that program has also hit some snags.
So for now, it's advantage SpaceX, right? But what about all this talk about the democratization of space? Is that just hype? Or are these rideshare missions actually opening up space for the smaller players?
It's not just hype. Those transporter missions, where they pack dozens of small satellites onto a single Falcon 9, total game changer. It used to be that only governments and massive corporations could afford to launch anything into space. Now, universities, startups, even smaller countries can get in on the action.
So instead of building your own rocket, you just buy a ticket on the SpaceX Express. It's like the Wild West up there, huh?
In a way, yeah. And it's fueling innovation in areas like Earth observation, space-based internet, and even in-space manufacturing.
Wait, in-space manufacturing? Are we talking about building stuff in orbit? Like an actual factory in space?
Exactly. Companies like Varda Space Industries are already experimenting with microgravity manufacturing, producing things like pharmaceuticals and fiber optics that are impossible to make here on Earth.
Now that's some serious sci-fi shit. So are we headed towards a future where space is just another industrial zone, with space miners, space factories, and space tourists clogging up all the orbital highways?
It's a real possibility. We're already seeing some tension with all those Starlink satellites crowding low Earth orbit. Astronomers are raising concerns about space debris and how those satellites are interfering with their observations.
Yeah, I've heard those astronomers bitch about streaks of light from Starlink satellites, messing up their long exposure shots of distant galaxies.
It's a valid concern. As space gets more crowded, we're going to need new rules and technologies to manage all that traffic and mitigate the risks.
Space traffic control, huh? That's a
Yeah.
job I wouldn't want. Okay, we've talked about the impact on the industry, the rise of the smaller players, and the potential for a future filled with space factories and orbital traffic jams. What else jumps out at you from all this data?
The role of government is really interesting. SpaceX is definitely benefiting from government contracts, especially from the U.S. Space Force and NASA. But there are also growing concerns about SpaceX's dominance and the potential for them to become a monopoly.
Right, because if SpaceX is the only game in town, they can basically dictate their own terms.
Yeah.
And knowing Elon, he's not exactly known for being shy about charging top dollar.
It raises an important question about the long-term sustainability of the space industry. Do we want to see a single company control so much of the access to space? Or should we encourage more competition to ensure a healthy and diverse ecosystem?
Yeah, competition usually leads to better products and lower prices. But on the other hand, SpaceX is making incredible progress. They're launching missions to the moon, sending probes to Mars, and they're working on that massive Starship that's supposed to take us to Mars someday.
That's true. SpaceX's ambition is undeniable. But it's also crucial to consider the potential downsides of having a single company with so much power and influence. It's a delicate balance.
Balance, huh? That's something Elon doesn't seem to worry about too much. But hey, that's what makes him such a fascinating character, right?
He is a complex figure, that's for sure. And his impact on the space industry is impossible to deny.
Well said. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. We talked about SpaceX's impact on the industry, the rise of smaller players, the potential for space manufacturing and traffic jams, and that delicate balance between SpaceX's ambition and their potential to become too dominant.
We've just scratched the surface, but hopefully this gives you a glimpse into the rapidly changing world of SpaceX and its impact on space exploration.
Exactly. And now, in part 3, we're going to shift gears and take a closer look at some of the specific missions SpaceX is launching and what they mean for the future of space exploration.
All right, let's take a closer look at some of these SpaceX missions. Remember that metal asteroid we talked about? 16 Psyche?
Yeah, the one that's supposedly worth more than the entire economy of Earth. Sign me up for that mining expedition.
Whoa there, hold your horses. The Psyche mission, which launched on a Falcon Heavy back in October 2023, is all about scientific exploration, They're studying the asteroid's composition, its magnetic field, and its history, trying to understand more about the early solar system.
So it's more about gathering intel than grabbing a pickaxe and mining that space gold. That's a bummer.
Yeah, for now it is. But the data they get back from Psyche could help us figure out how to mine asteroids someday. Think about it. If we could abstract resources from asteroids, it could completely revolutionize space exploration and resource management.
Okay, I'm listening. What about that Europa Clipper mission? Any chance of finding those alien squids?
The Europa Clipper, which also launched on a Falcon Heavy in October 2024, is focused on Jupiter's moon Europa. It's going to map the surface, analyze the composition of its oceans, and search for signs of potential habitability.
So no direct squid hunting. But maybe we'll find some microbial life. That'd still be pretty damn cool.
Absolutely. And here's something interesting. Both Psyche and Europa Clipper are NASA missions, but they're launching on SpaceX rockets.
Right, because NASA's own space launch system, the SLS, has been delayed so many times, it's practically a museum piece at this point.
Exactly. It really goes to show how things are changing in the space industry. NASA is relying more and more on commercial partners like SpaceX for these deep space missions.
Makes sense. Private companies are usually a hell of a lot faster and more efficient than those massive government bureaucracies. Okay, let's talk about those NRO missions. What's the deal with all those secret spy satellites?
The National Reconnaissance Office, or NRO, is super secretive. We don't know a lot of the details about their missions, but we do know they're launching these things called Starshield satellites, built by SpaceX and Northrop Grumman, for intelligence gathering, basically.
And so they're basically keeping tabs on everyone and everything from space. Kind of creepy, but I guess it's necessary in this day and age, right?
It's a complex issue. There are implications for national security, international relations, even personal privacy. It's something to think about as space becomes more accessible and more militarized, for sure.
Yeah, space wars are definitely not something I want to see in my lifetime. Okay, last but not least, let's talk about Starlink. They're launching dozens of those satellites every month. Are they actually making a difference?
Starlink is already providing high-speed internet access to thousands of people in remote areas, and the network is constantly growing. They've even partnered with the U.S. military to provide battlefield communications.
So it's not just about streaming Netflix in your cabin in the woods, huh?
It's much bigger than that. Starlink has the potential to bridge the digital divide, provide essential communication in disaster zones, and even connect people in developing countries who have never had internet access before.
Wow, that's actually pretty impressive.
Oh.
But makes you wonder who controls the internet in space, right?
Exactly. It's a powerful technology with huge implications. We need to think carefully about the ethical and geopolitical implications of these massive satellite constellations.
Yeah. Deep stuff. Okay, we've looked at some specific missions, Psyche, Europa Clipper, those NRO Starshield satellites, and the ever-expanding Starlink network. What's your final takeaway for our listeners?
I think the takeaway here is that SpaceX isn't just about launching rockets. They're pushing the limits of science, technology, and even our understanding of the universe. But as we become more dependent on space, we need to think critically about the bigger picture and make sure that space exploration benefits all of humanity.
Well said. That wraps up our deep dive into SpaceX launches. Thanks for joining us, and remember, keep looking up. Who knows what we'll discover next?